Okay, I want you to try something with me for a second. Just close your eyes. Imagine you're walking into a library in London.
Okay.
It's the late 19th century. You got these heavy velvet drapes. You can smell coal smoke and old paper. Gaslight is sort of flickering on the walls. And in the corner, there's a man asleep in a chair. It's Charles Dickens.
And at this point in history, he is, I mean, arguably the most famous storyteller on the entire planet.
Right. But the thing is, he isn't alone in the room. This is based on a famous unfinished watercolor. It's called Dickens' Dream.
I know this one.
Yeah, and in the painting, the room is just, it's absolutely suffocated with people. But they're not really people. They're like vapors.
Ghostly images, yeah, they're swirling all around him.
They're swirling around his desk. They're floating up to the ceiling, crowding around his chair. There are hundreds of them.
It's such a chaotic image, isn't it? You can pick them out. There's Tiny Tim, you see Oliver Twist, you see all these grotesque villains and weeping widows.
And what I love about starting with that image is that it kind of visually represents this very strange psychological reality for writers.
It does. When you look at that painting, it doesn't look like Dickens created them.
No.
It looks like they are haunting him.
That is the perfect word for it. Haunting. These aren't just names on a page or, functions of a plot.
Yeah.
To the writer, and then eventually to us, the readers, they become these living, breathing entities.
They almost seem to possess the person who imagined them.
Exactly. And that is what we're diving into today. We are looking at the mechanics of character. Because, let's be honest, you can have the most intricate plot in the world.
Explosions, political intrigue.
Dragons, whatever. But if there isn't a someone at the center of it all.
Does any of it actually matter?
It really doesn't. I was thinking about this when I was going through the source material. Without someone, nothing really happens. I mean, sure, events might occur, a volcano erupts, a car crashes, but they don't have any meaning.
Right. We only care about the what and the where because it's happening to a who. Yeah.
And what's so fascinating is that long after you've forgotten the plot of a book you read 10 years ago, you probably remember the person.
Oh, for sure.
You remember the specific grumpiness of Scrooge. You remember the sound of Huckleberry Finn's voice. They float free of the text. They become part of your own internal population of people.
So our mission today is to decode that architecture.
Yeah.
How do authors build these people out of words? We've got a stack of sources that is, honestly, a bit of an emotional roller coaster.
It really is.
We've got a literary toolkit to define our terms, which I think is going to bust some myths for a lot of us. And then we have 4 very different, very intense short stories.
We do. We are covering William Faulkner's Barn Burning, which is just a brutal coming-of-age story.
Brutal is the word.
Then we have Toni Morrison's Recitative, which is a brilliant psychological puzzle.
My brain still hurts from that one. And David Foster Wallace's Good People, which is this quiet, devastating look at a moral crisis. And then, just to keep us on our toes, we have a dark satire called Model's Assistant by Alyssa Netting.
And we'll even touch briefly on the oldest story in the world, the Epic of Gilgamesh, just to talk about monsters.
Yeah.
But let's start with the basics. Segment 1, the toolkit. We need to get our definition straight because I think a lot of us use terms like hero or character pretty loosely.
We do. And the source material makes a really important distinction right off the bat between a character and a personage.
Personage. That sounds incredibly formal, like something you'd see on a royal wedding invitation.
It does, doesn't it? But it's a useful, broad term. A character is any personage who acts or plays a part in the story. Usually that's a human.
Usually.
But, and this is key for sci-fi or fantasy fans, it doesn't have to be. It could be a robot, an alien, a talking rabbit.
What about a rock? Could a rock be a character?
Okay, well, here's the line in the sand. If a rock just sits there and gets rained on, it's scenery. It's part of the setting.
Right.
But if the rock thinks, boy, I'm lonely, I wish a lizard would come sit on me, suddenly you have a character.
Ah, okay.
The only requirement is that they have some human qualities. They need to think or feel pain or maybe fall in love.
So it's about consciousness, not biology.
Precisely. It's about the capacity for an internal experience.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But here's the one that always trips people up, and I see this in movie debates all the time. The difference between a hero and a protagonist.
Yes.
I'll be honest, I use these interchangeably.
Yeah.
If I'm watching a movie, the main guy is the hero. Why do we need to complicate it?
Because hero isn't a structural term. It's a moral one. It's a value judgment.
A value judge.
Yeah, it implies virtue. It implies the good guy who fights the villain. In older literature, like Greek myths, Heroes were these larger-than-life, almost godlike figures who embodied the best values of their culture. But in modern fiction, really, since the mid-19th century, the lead character isn't always good.
Okay, but usually the main character is the good guy. Or at least, we're supposed to root for them.
Usually. Maybe in a straightforward superhero movie, but think about the source materials example. Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado. Do you remember the main character, Montresor?
Oh, vividly.
Ah.
He's the guy who lures his friend down into the catacombs with the promise of some fancy wine.
I bet.
And then he walls him up in a niche, chains him to the wall, and just builds a brick wall in front of him.
Alive. He walls him up alive because of some vague insult from years ago. Now, is Montresor the hero?
Definitely not. He's a psychopath. He's the villain to the story.
He acts like a villain, yes. But structurally, he is unequivocally the protagonist.
How so?
The camera follows him. We hear his thoughts. We are stuck inside his head for the entire story. The story is about his desire for revenge. If you call him the hero, you break the definition because there's nothing heroic about him at all. But if you call him the protagonist, you just mean he's the first actor. He's the one driving the car.
So the protagonist is just the driver. It doesn't matter if they're driving an ambulance to save lives or a getaway car after a bank robbery?
Exactly. The protagonist is the central engine of the story. The antagonist is just the person or force that gets in their way. You can have a villainous protagonist, which leads us straight to the concept of the antihero.
Which feels like it's everywhere right now. Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, all those shows.
It's a huge trend, but it started way, way back. The source cites the underground man from Dostoevsky, who is just paralyzed by his own neuroses and spite.
Or even modern comedic examples. The source mentions Homer Simpson.
Homer Simpson is a perfect antihero. An antihero is a protagonist who just lacks those traditional heroic qualities like courage or grace or, high morality. We don't necessarily admire them.
No, you don't want to be Homer Simpson.
But we're compelled by them. We can't look away.
I love that distinction. It really frees you up to enjoy a story, even if you don't want to be friends with the main character. Okay, now let's talk about shape. Round versus flat.
Yes.
I feel like my high school English teacher used flat as an insult. Like, don't write flat characters. That's just lazy writing.
And that is one of the most common misconceptions in all of literature. The source material is so clear here. Flat does not mean bad writing.
Really? Because flat just sounds, boring. Uninspired.
Think of it as focused instead of boring. A round character is complex. They have conflicting motives. They can surprise us. They feel like a real person you can't quite pin down.
Okay.
A flat character is one-dimensional. They usually have one defining trait or a single behavior. But, and this is the crucial part, you need them.
Why, though? Wouldn't a book be better if every single character was deep and complex?
It would be exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. If every character in a book was deeply psychologically complex, the story would grind to a halt. Well, you'd never get to the plot because you'd be spending pages dissecting the waiter's childhood trauma and the taxi driver's secret fears, and you just can't. You need flat characters to provide contrast or humor, or sometimes just to move the plot along.
The source mentions Dickens again here, right?
Dickens was the absolute master of the flat character. He created these people who were memorable because they were flat. The source mentions a character who constantly pulls himself up by his own hair.
That's hilarious.
Or another character who's so slippery he has to be fluffed up like a pillow because he keeps sliding out of chairs.
And it just sticks in your brain. You never forget that.
Exactly. A well-written flat character is iconic. Think of the Wicked Witch of the West. She's flat.
I guess she is.
She's evil. She wants the ruby slippers. And she hates water. That's pretty much it. But is she a badly written character? No, she's unforgettable.
Okay, that completely changes my perspective. Flat isn't a failure. It's a specific tool for a specific job.
Precise.
All right, one more set of terms before we hit the stories. Dynamic versus static. This is about change, right?
Yes. Does the character change internally over the course of the story? If, yes, they're dynamic. If they end the story pretty much the same person they were when they started, they're static.
Okay, that seems straightforward enough.
But here's where it gets really interesting. A character can be round, complex, nuanced, but still be static.
Wait, unpack that for me. How can you be complex but not change?
Think of Sherlock Holmes. Is he a complex character?
Oh, absolutely. He's brilliant, he's moody, he's socially awkward, he might have a drug problem. He's definitely round.
He's very round. But in most of the stories, does he actually change? Does he learn a big life lesson and become a fundamentally different man by the end?
No. He solves the case, says something clever, and goes back to Baker Street to play his violin.
Exactly. He is round but static. Now compare that to, say, Huckleberry Finn, who starts with a certain worldview about slavery and society and ends with a completely different one.
He's changed by his journey on the river.
He's been fundamentally altered. He's round and dynamic.
That is a great nuance. Just because you're complicated doesn't mean you evolve. Okay, so we know what these characters are. How do authors actually tell us who they are? The source talks about the art of detection.
This is the classic showing versus telling debate. Direct characterization is telling. The author just comes out and says he was a bitter, angry man.
Simple, efficient.
Very. But indirect characterization is showing. The author gives you clues, and you, the reader, have to play detective.
Yeah, and the source lists what these clues are. Names, physical appearance, the objects they own, the props of their life, I love that, and of course their actions.
And what they do versus what they say, which cannot be two very different things.
Right, and the source gives us this fantastic example from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre to illustrate this. It's a dialogue between Jane and the housekeeper, Mrs. Fairfax, about the mysterious Mr. Rochester.
It's a masterclass in showing.
I have the quote right here. Mrs. Fairfax is trying to describe him, but she's really struggling. She says, "He is very respected here. I have no cause to complain of him, but he's rather peculiar, perhaps."
Notice what's happening there. She's not giving a clear picture at all. She's hedging. Perhaps, rather.
She sounds uncertain, and then she says, "You cannot be always sure whether he is in jest or earnest. You don't thoroughly understand him."
This is just brilliant indirect characterization. On the surface, okay, we learn that Rochester is moody and enigmatic. Big surprise. But look deeper. What does this tell us about Mrs. Fairfax herself?
It tells us she's confused by him. Maybe she's a bit simple, not in a mean way, but just literal.
Jane, the narrator, nails it. She thinks to herself that Mrs. Fairfax is a flat observer. Jane thinks Mr. Rochester was Mr. Rochester in her eyes, nothing more. It tells us that Mrs. Fairfax is a literal thinker who can't grasp complexity. So in one page of dialogue, Bronte has characterized the mystery man, Rochester, the simple housekeeper, Mrs. Fairfax, and the intellectual hunger of our protagonist, Jane.
All without ever saying Jane was smart or Mrs. Fairfax was simple. It's just layers upon layers of inference.
That is the magic of it.
Okay, speaking of layers and speaking of complicated father-son relationships, let's move to our first deep dive story. William Faulkner's Barn Burning. This story. Man, it hit me hard.
It's a heavy one. It's visceral. You feel it in your body.
Let's look at the protagonist, Sardi. Colonel Sartorius Snopes. He's 10 years old. And Faulkner puts us right inside his body in this opening scene. And it is physically uncomfortable.
It's meant to be. The smell is the first thing that hits you. The source really highlights this description. The store where the court is being held smells like cheese and hermetic meat, and also fear and despair.
Cheese and fear. That is such a bizarre and powerful combination.
It's brilliant, though. It grounds the high, abstract concept of justice in the stomach of a hungry kid. Sardi is starving. He can smell the food, but he can also smell the danger.
And he's standing in this makeshift courtroom, and his father, Abner, is on trial for burning down a barn. Again.
And Sardi knows his dad did it.
He knows. And the justice of the peace calls Sardi to come forward. And this is the moment where the mechanics of character really kick in. Faulkner describes Sardi feeling this old, fierce pull of blood.
It's not love, though, is it? When you read it, you don't get the sense that Sardi actually loves his father.
No, that's the key. It's not affection. It's like gravity. Sardi feels bound to his father, not because his father is good to him. Abner hits him, he's cold, he's distant, but just because he is blood.
It's a tribal connection. Abner Snopes, the father, is the antagonist here, and he is terrifying.
How does Faulkner describe him? It was very metallic, right?
Yes. He's described as stiff, wolf-like, and looking like a figure cut from tin. There's no depth, no softness to him at all. He walks with a limp because he was shot in the heel while stealing horses during the Civil War.
Stealing horses from his own side, right, from the Confederates.
Exactly. He wasn't a soldier fighting for a cause. He was a mercenary. He has no loyalty to anything but himself and his own twisted sense of honor.
And his weapon of choice is fire.
Hence the title, Barn Burning. Right. For Abner, fire is the one weapon for the preservation of integrity. When he feels slighted or disrespected by a wealthy landowner, he doesn't sue them. He doesn't fight them with his fists. He knows he'd
And he
lose.
burns their barn down.
It's this disproportionate, scorched earth response to feeling powerless.
And poor Sardi is caught in the middle of it. The central conflict of the story is blood versus truth. Abner tells Sardi, stick to your own blood or you ain't gonna have any blood to stick to you.
It's a mafia mentality. It's omerta.
It is. He demands absolute complicity from his son. So Sardi is a dynamic character just waiting to happen. He starts the story as a defender of his father, but you can feel the pressure building with every page.
And the breaking point, the inciting incident for his change, is the rug. This part of the story drove me crazy reading it, the sheer pettiness of it all.
Walk us through it.
So Abner and his family moved to a new sharecropping farm owned by Major Despain, a wealthy landowner. Abner walks into the big house, and he deliberately tracks horse manure onto a pristine, white, $100 French rug.
It's such a petty, aggressive act. He drags that stiff, injured foot right through the horse droppings and just wipes it all over the rug.
It's class warfare in a single gesture. He hates the wealth and the order that Despain represents.
But then Despain demands the rug be cleaned. And Abner takes it home, and he uses this harsh lye soap, and he uses a rough field stone to scrub it. He ruins it completely.
He destroys the very thing he's supposed to fix.
And that is the key insight into Abner's character, isn't it? He is incapable of repair. He can only destroy.
Exactly. And when Despain says, okay, you've ruined my rug, you owe me 20 bushels of corn, Abner decides that this is the injustice.
Which is insane. It's a perfectly fair punishment for what he did.
To us, yes, it seems logical. But to Abner, any authority exerted over him is a profound insult. So he decides to burn Despain's barn.
And this is where Sardi snaps. The unfairness of it all. He realizes his father is essentially a flat force of nature. He will never change. He is a static monster. If Sardi wants a different life, he has to be the one to change.
The climax is breathless. The writing just picks up speed. Sardi escapes his mother's grip. He runs to the big house, and he just manages to gasp out the word barn. He warns the landowner.
He betrays the boy.
He chooses truth, and then he just runs. He hears the gunshots behind him. We assume it's Major Despain shooting at his father, and he just keeps running.
He ends up on a hill at midnight.
Yeah.
And there's this really poignant moment where he tries to comfort himself. He says, he was brave, he was in the war, he's trying to rewrite his father's character into something heroic.
But the narrator tells us the truth. Abner wasn't brave. He was just in it for the booty, for the stuff he could steal. Sardi is trying to salvage some dignity for his bloodline, but he knows deep down that it's a lie.
And the last line, he did not look back. That's the key dynamic shift. He walks into the dark woods toward the dawn. He has lost his family, but he has gained his soul.
He breaks the cycle. It's a tragic victory, but it is a victory nonetheless. He steps out of his father's destructive story and finally starts his own.
But real life,
Yeah.
or maybe I should say, adult life isn't usually that clean, is it? You don't just run away from your history and poof, it's gone.
No, not at all.
Usually your history keeps bumping into you. It shows up at the grocery store. It sits down next to you at a diner.
I see where you're going with this. You're talking about recitative.
Exactly. If Faulkner's story is about the moment you break the chain, Toni Morrison's is about what happens when you're still tangled up in it 20 years later. Recitative is. Honestly, it's a mind game.
Morrison called it a lark, an experiment, and the experiment is so simple but absolutely devastating.
The story follows two girls, Twyla and Roberta, who meet at an orphanage called St. Bonnie's. One is black and one is white. But, and this is the whole point, Morrison never tells us which is which.
And let me ask you, when you were reading it, did you try to figure it out?
Oh, immediately. I fell right into the trap. I read the first 3 pages, and I was so confident. I was like, okay, Twyla's the black girl, Roberta's the white girl, done, solved it.
And then what happened?
And then Morrison dropped a sentence on page 4 about the food they ate, or the way their hair smelled, or who listened to what music, and I suddenly thought, wait a minute. Do I have that completely backwards?
That is the genius of the lark. Morrison is weaponizing your own cultural database against you. She uses class codes, food, clothes, how their mothers behave, but she deliberately removes all the racial codes.
And it forces you, the reader, to examine your own stereotypes.
Constantly.
Let's look at some of the codes she uses. The food was the big one for me. At the orphanage, Twyla says her own mother didn't bring her anything to eat, but Roberta's mother brought chicken legs and ham sandwiches.
Okay, stop right there. In your mind, is fried chicken and ham a racial code?
Well, historically, in American stereotypes, yeah, it can be. It points toward a traditional African-American menu, especially in the South. So I thought, okay, Roberta is black. Easy.
But wait. Later in the story, we see Roberta is the one who marries a rich guy and lives in a fancy suburb with a limo and a driver. Meanwhile, Twyla marries a fireman and lives in a working-class neighborhood.
Right, and then I thought, well, statistically, in that time period, the wealth gap would probably suggest that Roberta is white.
See what you're doing? You're oscillating. You're using socioeconomic statistics to try and pin down biology. Morrison is stripping away the direct characterization. She never says the words black or white attached to a name, and she leaves only the context. And it turns out, context is incredibly slippery.
It's a mirror. The story isn't actually about their race, it's about our perception of their race.
Precisely. And the story tracks their relationship through these almost static snapshots over 20 years.
Right. First, they meet at the orphanage St. Bonnie's. They're 8 years old. They aren't real orphans. They are dumped kids. Twyla's mom dances all night. Roberta's mom is sick. They bond because they're the outcasts among the outcasts.
Then they meet at a Howard Johnson's diner years later. Twyla is a waitress there. Roberta is just passing through with 2 guys on her way to see Jimi Hendrix.
And Roberta's so cold to her, she acts like she doesn't even know Twyla. It's a painful scene. Twyla is standing there in her little waitress uniform, and Roberta's this cool, aloof hippie chick, and the class divide is just enormous.
Then they meet again years later at a fancy new grocery store. Roberta is rich now. Twyla is just buying candy for her son, and they have this moment of connection again. They catch up.
And finally, they meet at a picket line. It's a race riot over the forced busing of school children to integrate schools. And this is where the static tension that's been building just explodes. They are on opposite sides of the protest.
But the core of the story, the thing that keeps coming back, haunting them like one of Dickens' ghosts, is Maggie.
Maggie, the sandy-colored kitchen worker at the orphanage. She had legs like parentheses, and she couldn't speak.
Maggie is the absolute key to the characterization of both women. There's this memory war between Twyla and Roberta about what actually happened to Maggie in the orchard.
It keeps changing. First, Twyla remembers Maggie just falling down. Then, at the diner, Roberta claims, no, the big girls pushed her down, and we kicked her while she was on the ground. And Twyla denies it. She's horrified. She says, I did not kick her.
Later at the protest, Roberta changes the story again. She says, I didn't say you kicked her, I said I kicked her. And then finally, in the very last scene, Roberta admits she's not sure if they kicked her, but she knows they wanted to.
That's the aha moment for me. We wanted to. Maggie represents their shared powerlessness. They were just little girls with no control over their lives, dumped kids. They saw Maggie, who was even more powerless, who couldn't even speak to defend herself, and they projected all their rage and fear onto her.
Exactly. Maggie was the scapegoat. And the ambiguity of Maggie's raceness? Roberta claims she was black. Twyla insists she wasn't. That just mirrors the ambiguity of the main characters themselves.
Wow.
Morrison is showing us how character isn't just a set of fixed traits we're born with. Character is constructed. It's constructed by memory, by trauma, and by who is looking at you. By the end, they're just 2 middle-aged women realizing they might have invented a villain just to deal with their own pain.
It's brilliant. It makes you question every single memory you have. Did I really see that, or did I just want to see it that way?
It's the unreliability of the self.
Okay, let's move from the external social conflict of Recitaf to an internal, completely silent storm.
Yeah.
David Foster Wallace's Good People.
This is perhaps the quietest story in the stack, but the internal volume is deafening.
The setting is a picnic table by a lake. That's it. Lane Dean Jr. and his girlfriend Sherry are just sitting there. They barely move. There's almost zero external action. But the stakes are life and death.
Sherry is pregnant. They have an appointment at an abortion clinic. And Lane Dean is a devout Christian, and he is in absolute agony.
The title is Good People. Lane desperately wants to be good people.
But he feels like a total fraud. This is a classic example of a round character experiencing a huge dynamic internal shift while remaining statically frozen in physical space.
There are 2 armies battling inside him, right? Hypocrisy versus faith.
Exactly. He knows he should love Sherry. He knows the good Christian thing to do is to marry her and raise the child. He keeps trying to force himself to feel that love, but he's paralyzed by this terrible, simple truth. He doesn't love her.
And he feels that lack of love is a sin. He thinks he's going to hell not because of the abortion necessarily, but because his heart is a lie. He feels cursed because he can't make his heart do what his religion tells him it should do.
And the brilliance of the characterization here is all in the silence. It's all indirect. Lane is reading Sherry without her saying a single word. He looks at her hands, her stillness. He watches her face. And he realizes she has already made a decision.
This is the vision he has, right, for the moment of grace. He realizes Cherie isn't going to go through with it. She's going to keep the baby.
And this is the crucial part. She's going to let him off the hook. She's not going to force him to marry her because she knows he doesn't love her.
And in that one moment, Lane realizes what true goodness and courage are. It completely challenges his definition of a hero. He thought being a hero meant saving the day or doing the right thing according to the rule book.
But he sees that Cherie is the hero because she is facing the truth without demanding anything from him. She has a courage he lacks.
And he realizes that simply trusting his heart, even if his heart is messy and scared and imperfect, is better than living a lie. The story ends without him actually moving, right? It's just this internal epiphany.
Right. It leaves us in that suspended moment. It's a snapshot of a soul cracking open. Wallace shows us that character isn't just about what you do. It's the war you fight inside your own head when no one is watching.
That connects back to Sardi and barn burning, doesn't it? Sardi has to physically run away to find himself.
Yeah.
Lane Dean has to sit perfectly still to find himself. But both are breaking out of a cage. One is a cage of blood and family. The other is a cage of religious expectation.
That's a great connection.
Okay, from the sublime to the ridiculous. But also kind of terrifying. Our final story, Model's Assistant by Alyssa Nutting.
This is a sharp left turn into satire. We are moving from the deep moral earnestness of Wallace to a world that is plastic, cruel, and darkly hilarious.
We have Garla, the supermodel. She is a force of nature. Her catchphrase is just shouting vodka or vodka,
Yeah.
She is the absolute definition of a flat character who just completely dominates the room.
She's a type. The untouchable, chaotic celebrity. She treats people like furniture. Literally, she calls her assistant, our narrator, Dr. Television, or woman. She puts her foot in a fish tank at a party just because she can. She's completely absurd.
And then we have the narrator. She describes herself as the nerd at the party. She hates herself, or at least she hates being ordinary. She finds a jeweled phone, the Garla phone, that only Garla can call, and she becomes obsessed.
This relationship is fascinating in a horrifying way. The narrator quits her job to be Garla's assistant, but she's really more like a pet. Garla says things to her like, put you in special coffin, which sounds vaguely affectionate but is actually horrifying.
It's totally dehumanizing, but the narrator loves it. She says she wants to be near rare substances. She's willing to be vomited on, ignored, and humiliated just to be in Garla's orbit.
And this connects us back to our monsters theme. The source material brings up the Epic of Gilgamesh. You have Enkidu the wild man and Humbaba the forest monster. The question here is, who is the monster?
Right. Is it Garla? She's certainly monstrous in her behavior. She's an ego monster.
She is, but you could argue the narrator is the real monster, a monster of self-erasure. She is willing to completely destroy her own identity to become an accessory to someone else's fame. She looks in the mirror and sees a sandwich, something benign and consumable. She wants to be consumed by Garla's beauty.
There's that scene at the end where the narrator's drunk. Garla's bodyguard just dumps her in a taxi like a bedpan, and she's clutching the Garla phone. And she says she's grateful to be turned into something special. It's so dark.
She's grateful for the abuse because it gives her proximity to fame.
Wow.
It's a brutal critique of how our culture treats beauty and celebrity. We treat them as heroes, going all the way back to our first definition, when often they are just protagonists of their own chaotic, selfish lives. The narrator fails to be the protagonist of her own story.
She voluntarily becomes a minor character in someone else's.
That is a chilling way to put it, and it connects back to barn burning again, but in reverse. Sardi refuses to be a minor character in his father's story of destruction. He runs away to become the protagonist of his own life. The model's assistant does the exact opposite. She runs toward the abuse to avoid having to be herself.
Wow. That really does tie the whole stack together. We have Sardi breaking free, Lane Dean facing the silent truth, Twyla and Roberta wrestling with a past they can't even agree on, and the model's assistant just surrendering to the void.
It shows the whole spectrum of human character, from heroic defiance to pathetic surrender, and all of them are built out of nothing more than words on a page.
So what does this all mean for us, for the listener? Why should we care about Abner Snopes' Ruined Rug or Garla the Supermodel?
I think reading fiction like this, it trains us. It trains us to look beyond the flat surface of the people we meet every day.
How so?
When you read Good People, you might realize that the quiet guy sitting on the park bench isn't just a blank slate. He might be fighting a spiritual war inside his own head. When you read recitative, you realize that the person you're arguing with might be reacting to a trauma from 20 years ago that you can't possibly see.
It makes us better detectives,
Yeah.
better at indirect characterization in real life.
Exactly. It teaches us empathy. It teaches us that everyone is the protagonist of their own story, battling their own barn burnings or their own silent picnic table crises. We shouldn't be like Mrs. Fairfax, seeing people as nothing more than their job title or their appearance.
That's a really powerful takeaway.
Mm.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with. We talked about Toni Morrison's experiment, removing the racial codes to see what's left.
Yes.
Imagine we stripped away your direct characterization. Take away your name, your job title, your physical description. Take away your entire bio. What indirect clues would be left? If someone just watched what you did and how you spoke to people for a week, would they figure out who you really are?
That is a terrifying question.
Would you be the hero, the villain, the static character who never really changes? Or just the person holding the phone waiting for someone else to call?
I think I need to go reflect on some of my life choices now.
Don't we all? Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.